Continuing our coverage here at Netroots Nation 2019 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joining me is someone who I spoke to, I think, at the very first. Wasn't called Netroots Nation at the time. It was called Yearly Co's. And that was in Las Vegas. That was up in a Sky booth.
Yes.
The Majority Report was the only radio row. There was no other radio there, as far as I know.
We were saying, you are looking live.
We were looking, and of course, it was it's in the evening, and that was back in the day. David Dayen, welcome back to the program. It's
Thank
always
you.
a pleasure. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I want to get into the meta Netroots thing in a bit, but there's two things I want to talk to you about. And one that is an article that is in the American Prospect, of which you are the executive editor now.
That's right, prospect.org.
And the other is something that's going to be taking place, and I should just say, we're pre-taping this at almost 11 o'clock in the morning, because at noon there is a protest, and this is something that Netroots has adopted in the past, I think, like half a dozen years.
Yeah.
They get involved in the communities that they're in. There is an issue around the corner from here involving a hospital. You were telling me a little bit of it last night when I was doing my pre-research.
He's a tireless worker, ladies and
at a
gentlemen.
bar.
He's always hustling for you.
It's the conversations at the bars, I should say, surrounding Netroots is probably some of like the highest level nerd.
The nerdiest conversations you'll ever hear at a bar. Yes.
Great way to scare away other people. But
yes.
Okay, so there's a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
This involves a hedge funder, and it's almost like, well, I want to say it's a metaphor, but it's actually not even. It's just illustrative of what's happening all across the country.
So we have a piece. It's our feature story today at prospect.org by Mike Elk, who's a labor reporter, about this hospital. It's called Hahnemann University Hospital. It's just steps from here in Philadelphia, and it's 171 years old. And 2 years ago, it was bought by a private equity firm, a guy named Joel Freedman, and it's Paladin Healthcare is the sort of holding company that he used to purchase this thing 2 years ago. This is a hospital that serves a very low-income community. Over half of the patients are on Medicaid. Another chunk are on Medicare. 2/3 of the patients are Black or Latino. It serves a very low-income community, and there is no reason for a private equity firm that's for-profit to buy a hospital that serves such a low-income community. There are lower reimbursement rates. It's not a money-making enterprise to be a low-income serving hospital. Usually, if a private equity firm or a for-profit firm is going to buy a hospital, they're going to partner it with suburban hospitals,
right.
Ones that can, outpatient clinics, something that can earn them a lot of money to keep, sort of cross-subsidize the low-income hospital, keep it going. Paladin's entire portfolio is urban, low-income serving hospitals. They have Howard University Hospital in Washington, D.C. They have 4 low-income hospitals in Los Angeles, and they have Hahnemann in Philadelphia.
And all these low-income hospitals, and here's the clue, right?
Yeah.
Are like in like these urban centers
in big cities that are gentrifying, that are improving the areas surrounding the hospital. So, newsflash, here's what comes next. So 2 years after buying this hospital, Paladin put Hahnemann into bankruptcy, but only the hospital, not the underlying real estate, which is this very lucrative real estate in what is called a gateway community for gentrification. And he is selling the real estate to the highest bidder. It is very likely that what will be built there are luxury condos or really lucrative housing and real estate to develop that and get rid of this hospital, which has been there for almost 200 years.
Something like this happened to St. Vincent's in New York City.
Right.
half a dozen years ago. But wait a second. So let me just walk me through how this works out. He buys the hospital. It comes with the property, obviously, and
he puts no money into the hospital. He does not invest in any resources for the hospital.
He sets up another entity, a LLC or an S corp or whatever it is. He sells the property from the first entity, which is the hospital.
He's in the process of doing this, but yes, you basically split the company from the real estate. And we see this all the time in private equity. And then
the hospital pays a lease.
Pays rent, yeah.
Rent.
It's called a sale leaseback, and we saw it with the Marsh grocery chain. We saw it with Sears. Sears did a sale leaseback deal where they put the real estate into a separate entity and then had the company.
We spoke about that, and the CEO basically had a side business, which is like, oh, I'm going to be the real estate owner for the Sears company, and I'm going to bilk the hell out of the company because I don't have as much interest in the company as I do in the real estate.
And the Sears properties that he split off were in very lucrative areas, like the one in California, in Los Angeles, is in downtown Santa Monica, an incredibly lucrative piece of real estate, and they actually closed the facility, and it's Edward Lampert's decision to close a Sears, right? So he closes the facility. The real estate then goes into the hands of this Seritage, this extra company, and then they can develop it. And so they're developing that property in Santa Monica. But this is a similar play. But it's kind of the first time, I know St. Vincent's is similar, but this is the first time that a private equity firm, the first time that our experts could figure out that a private equity firm has sold off the real estate of a hospital. And if it works, this is going to be a model, not just for this guy's stuff in DC and LA, but other firms will get the message that, oh, I can buy an urban hospital in a gentrifying area and then sell it off after a few years for the real estate and make billions of dollars. This is a really important story because of what this signifies as a private equity model to put profit over the health of millions of Americans.
And then I guess presumably they're going to be looking for any other type of like major institutional buildings that are
an
located,
educational facility, or who knows,
schools, and so that creates pressure to sort of probably close some inner.
And by the way, the 2017 tax law that Trump passed is actually, the deductibility of interest, which is why private equity uses this debt load model where they put debt onto a company because that interest on the debt is deductible from taxes. It's a tax advantage. So in the tax bill, they limited the deductibility of interest, which cuts against private equity's model. However, there's an exception for real estate in that. And big surprise, Trump puts an exception for real estate in this model of deducting interest. So there is an incentive for private equity firms to do these real estate plays now in the tax code, embedded in the tax code. And so there's even more reason, not just that it's lucrative, but it's also a great tax break for them.
All right, and folks can read more about this in the.
You can read more about this in the prospect. In sort of as we speak, I guess.
Okay.
There is a rally going on there with members of Netroots Nation and the union of nurses that is fighting this. Bernie Sanders' campaign has latched onto this as an example of putting greed and profits over health care. I believe Nina Turner will be there at this rally, and I've heard rumblings that Bernie might show up as well. There's sort of an action that's going on today around this. I'm going to go down there and cover it. Yeah,
I think we may actually send Brendan down too with a video camera. Maybe he can get a little bit of what's going on there. And this is and the idea. I mean, sort of turning towards Netroots. Mm-hmm. The idea for these type of things is to draw attention to it. When we were in Detroit, which was 6-7 years ago, maybe
5 years ago, it was about the water shutoffs.
It was about the water, and that helped, I think, bring a lot of attention to that issue.
And I remember in Arizona, they did a tour of one of Joe Arpaio's camps, I believe.
And so this, having a mass of activists just show up at an event in a city, any size city, but, particularly one that's not like a New York or an LA or a Chicago, that makes news. And then things start to loosen up a little bit.
This has already been an extremely controversial issue in Philadelphia.
I bet.
But there's some sense that they're fighting a losing battle. But, bringing national attention to this, I think, can help in possibly at least delaying or forestalling this. There are other hospitals in the area. There's almost kind of a cluster of hospitals around here, but they're all oversubscribed. They already are full to the gills.
Right.
And you got hundreds of patients, thousands of patient visits over the course of a year that now have nowhere really to go. And this is a very low-income community that is served by this hospital.
And I should say the other, part of that story is that this is another example of Sanders' campaign going in. I don't know how it works, frankly, how well it works and what implications it's going to have for his candidacy. But I don't think that we've seen a candidacy that seems so focused on leveraging the value they get as a candidate and the attention they get in leveraging that for things like Walmart workers, for something like this. I have a feeling there's been a half a dozen other things.
There has,
they've been using their email list. It's a great model.
It's really interesting, and it speaks to their whole not me, us kind of frame this year. And they have sent out warnings to communities around ICE raids.
Using their email
list. I was told last night that the Sanders campaign has sent over 50 million texts already. The entire 2016 campaign, they sent around 80 million.
Wow.
And we're a year out from the end of the campaign. They are using it as an organizing opportunity, maybe even to their detriment, because, campaigns are supposed to be focused on getting a guy elected, but they are building a different model.
Right.
And if it's, I think they're defining success differently. They're defining success as, can we get improvements for these communities while we have this spotlight on us through the presidential campaign?
The analog to me is sort of the social justice unionism, where we saw, like in the context of the Chicago strikes, and this happens a lot with teachers unions, where because they already have such an intimate relationship with a bigger part of the community, their students and the teachers, and the parents, they get more involved in a wider range of issues.
Right.
Frankly, it would be great if all of the campaigns were engaging in this type of stuff, using the media attention they get.
Right.
And
usually, to the extent that they do, a normal campaign would put out a press release saying, I support, these workers, or even show up at a picket line. We saw Biden do that. We saw Warren do that at the Stop and Shop up in New England.
Yeah.
But this takes it a step further. This is real organizing that's going on, and leveraging your most dedicated volunteers and supporters to come out and get engaged in issues and policies.
Well, when I had Bernie on the show a couple of weeks ago, I had asked, specifically thinking about Obama for America, which was an organization that was organizing and mobilizing, wasn't doing necessarily this type of work, but everybody presumed it would.
Right.
And
it didn't.
And he just shut it down.
Yeah.
And I asked Bernie specifically, is this campaign contingent?
Right.
And it was an emphatic no.
Right.
This is an interesting sort of twist, and it's going to be interesting to see how that, what the implications are of that.
Absolutely.
What I'd also like to see, and I'll probably have this conversation with other people because I want to get to some other things with you, is these candidates use their attention to implicate what's going on in Congress, because there's some real problems, I think, that we're having right now with Pelosi and Schumer, but that may be for another time.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk to you also about